Good afternoon. It's past noon now. Welcome to Child Strengths Domain, ages 0 to 5, Lunch and Learn Q&A series. So today's Lunch and Learn is specifically designed for care managers and for care manager supervisors that have working experience and working knowledge of health home serving children in the care management process with regard to the CANS New York. And so our goal for this afternoon is to try to enhance your skills to put you in a position to accurately and efficiently complete the CANS New York, with special attention being paid to an exploration of Child Strengths Domain 0 to 5, the 0 to 5 tool. So we're going to discuss practice approaches for gathering information. We're going to review some rating strategies that have worked for other care managers and care manager supervisors across the state of New York, things that have been successful. And then we're going to do some practice like we typically do in all of our lunch and learns and all of our trainings and presentations. So that's what we're pretty much going to work with today. We have an hour to do so. We're going to go from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time. And so I guess at this point in time, it's probably appropriate for me to introduce myself. My name is Brandon Howlett, and I'm a senior policy analyst at the CANS New York Technical Assistance Institute. And that is one specific part of the TCOM and CANS community. And so I work with a team of coaches as well as a team of regional leads to ensure that folks like yourself, care managers and care manager supervisors, or general assessors from Maximus and other entities, have the support and assistance they need to be experts in applying this tool in practice. And so I have about 20 plus years of experience in the field, either working with children and families in the community, coordinating services for them, or directly providing services for children and families on a community basis. So I typically like to take those experiences and inject them into the subject matter as they're relevant to some of the content that we're going to be presenting. I used the CANS New York for 13 years in practice. Although my employer is not in the state of New York, I do live in New York, and my experience is exclusively with the state of New York. I have a lot of experience, again, in health and human services or behavioral health, and I also have experience in training, obviously. And then, I like to take all of that experience and sort of make it useful and relevant to what it is that you all are going to be working through this afternoon. I also have about 13 years of experience actually utilizing the CANS New York tool in practice. And so, that's what you can kind of look forward to in terms of your questions, your concerns, your thoughts and ideas. I'll try to take those questions and answer them appropriately. So I'll encourage you to engage either via the chat box or by unmuting yourself and, speaking. I would also encourage you to, make sure that if you have the ability to do so, turn on your cameras, right? I would like to make this more of a conversation than a training. I think that seems to work better for most of the people that are here. So by way of the chat box, I would like to ask you all to write something in the chat box for me. Tell me what your hopes are from this presentation this afternoon. What are you looking to gain from this presentation? While you all are writing what it is that you hope to gain, I'm going to go over some tech reminders, some technical logistics, if you will. So we're obviously using the Zoom platform. Zoom can be temperamental at times. And so in the event that I'm knocked off of the Zoom call, knocked off the Zoom presentation, don't panic. I'll sign back in. I'll get back up and running. Just don't run away. We'll keep moving forward as soon as I get signed back in. In the event that you get knocked off, that's okay. Sign back in, and I'll see you in the waiting room, and I'll let you back into the presentation. So no harm, no foul with that. My colleague is not here in this session, but I definitely want to pay her some respect and some kudos for all of the hard work that she put into this particular presentation. She is our resident expert in early childhood development. Her name is Barry Wexler. She is our CANS New York Technical Institute regional lead for the Western region of the state of New York, and she comes to us, our institute, from Hillside Children's Center in Rochester, New York. So thank you again, Barry. I know you're not here, but I have to pay respect for all of the hard work and all the time that you put into this particular presentation. So let's see what we have so far. Continue to learn more about this section to be able to support my staff and others. Thank you, Doctor. I definitely think some of this information might put you in a position to really be able to help coach some of the people in your region. Rachel says a better understanding of how to approach the 0 to 5 population. We'll certainly touch on that, Rachel. Developing easier ways to ask CANS questions. Okay. Hope to have a better grasp on how to utilize the child's strengths and expand on the use of these. Angela, we'll certainly talk about that. Tips on how to approach 0 to 5 CANS interview questions. All right. So yeah, we'll certainly touch on a lot of this stuff. We have a lot of depth in the content today. So I think we'll be able to touch on all of that. So one more thing in the chat box. I would like you to indicate in the chat box what your current position is, what you do at your agency. So if you're a care manager, you can write CM, care manager supervisor, CMS. If you work for CS or something other than care, something other than you being a care manager, you can certainly write that in the chat box as well. So let me know what your position is and how long you've worked with children and families in the community. Last piece. Which version of the CANS New York do you typically use the most, the 0 to 5 or the 6 to 21? All right, so I see Angela, CS, excellent. Mia, CS. Monica, CS. I recognize some of your names. So we've had some time and space together, so that's great. 6 to 21, 6 to 21, excellent. CMS 0 to 5, excellent. All right, and make co-host. Barry, I was just giving you your kudos for helping to develop this wonderful slide deck and all of the in-depth content that we have. So thank you for joining us again, Barry. Okay, Rachel, nurse, CS, SED, 2 years old, nurse evaluator, CS, CANS SED, 6 to 21. I work with children for over 20 years intermittently. I used to be HCBS subset of CANS. Angela, that's excellent. So I would like for you to bring some of the context of that former work with regard to early childhood development into this conversation. That would be great. Let me ask you one more question. Is there anyone in our audience today for this presentation that works exclusively with the 0 to 5 version? I see Aaron says CANS 0 to 5. Dorca, bilingual care manager working with the population 3 years old. CANS 0 to 5, 6 to 21. Rachel says no. Okay. Okay, so let me dial that question back a little bit. Is there anyone that has experience using the 0 to 5 version more than just a handful of times? Okay. A lot of no's. Excuse me. A couple of yeses. Excellent. Rachel, I meant yes. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So what we'll do is we'll sort of pull on you a little bit when we get to when we start talking about the nuances of the 0 to 5 version versus the 6 to 21. I might ask a couple of questions and ask you to sort of elaborate or interpret, think about that particular question at hand. We're new to health homes and we're finalizing and onboarding with CCF. Excellent. We don't use the full CANS, just eligibility questions. Right. So some folks are not doing the full CANS based upon their job, and some folks are. So we have a nice mix of folks here. So let's jump into our learning objectives today. So after today's lunch and learn, you all, my participants, should be able, and our goal is to enhance your understanding of this particular child strengths domain for the 0 to 5 version. We want to increase your skills and also put you in a position to be able to do it most accurately and super efficiently. The very first thing we're going to try to tackle specifically, we're going to specifically talk about what useful strengths are, what they might look like for this age group, for the 0 to 5 age group. We're going to specifically spend some time discussing some of the tips for completing the campaign. And then lastly, what we want to do is develop some skills for applying the strengths that we identify with this population. Now, I just got your internet connection is unstable. You guys let me know if I'm unstable at all. I'll turn my video off and I will keep moving forward. I did not expect that, that to pop up. So this is what we're looking at in terms of our learning objectives. At any point, all right, thank you. At any point, if I'm starting to get choppy, just please let me know. Okay, too. Can you all hear me with when my screen is away? Give me a thumbs up if you all can hear me. Okay, in and out, it comes and goes. That's interesting. All right, so I'll just hang out like this for a minute and hopefully that will change in the next few minutes. So let's review what a strength is. What exactly is a strength? Okay, so strengths can either be a personal characteristic or environmental for a young person. So when you're looking at the personal characteristics, it's specifically an internal trait or internal characteristic, which sometimes shows up in an individual's personality or sometimes in their patterns of behavior. In very young kids, including infants and toddlers, you probably have heard the word temperament used before, right? So I have a 2-year-old, terrible twos is a real thing. His temperament is a reality for my entire family. So a young child's temperament could be described by a caregiver either as easy to soothe, the kid might be have a sociable temperament, or a happy baby. So, you know, that kind of names a few of those infant personality traits, if you will. An example of a personality characteristic that we would rate on the 0 to 5 cans in the child strengths domain is curiosity. So why do you think we? So so what do you look for? Let's just imagine we're working with a young person. What do you look for to identify curiosity and internal strength for a young person? How about that as a question? What do you look for to illustrate curiosity?
I look for them asking questions or, you know, seeing that their interest is piqued in different toys or, you know, the atmosphere. Absolutely.
That's exactly it, right? Where their interest goes, how they're handling the environment around them, whether they're sort of injecting themselves into a particular toy or a particular play method, right? Anasia says exploring the environment. Absolutely. So that's one way to kind of look at curiosity as a personal characteristic for a kid in this age range.
All right, you know what, I am going to keep us going while Brandon hopefully logs out and logs back in. So I do apologize. This morning, we had no issues with our internet at all, but yesterday, apparently he was in a training, he may have said, with California group and lost his connection 5 times. So while I pull up a copy of this PowerPoint, let me ask you this question now. When we think about those external strengths from the environment, right? If you think of the slide that we just had up where we saw the little guy with the internal strength of curiosity, and then there's the photo of a family, we talk about external strengths, and those are things in the environment, like the people around us, or the availability or access that we have to the people, or to influences in the community, or other things that may be a part of the world around us that aren't internal or intrinsic or part of our personality or temperament. And so the external strengths are something that we really want to make sure we can identify if they exist when we're looking and working with a child who is very young, right? Because more often than not, those external strengths are going to be what help to build the internal strengths. So just get us started right here. All right, so hopefully you guys can see the slides that are up. Yeah, Rachel, good. You're the only one on video, so I'm looking to you for a nod, thank you. All right, so get my chat box up here as well. Great, all right. Okay, and so yes, let's move on then after looking at how we can look at strengths in those two categories. So why is it helpful? Why do we focus on strengths? Why do we focus on strengths? Anybody have any ideas? Why do we even think about this? Feel free to chat it or unmute yourself.
I think we look at strengths because those are the things that help us develop goals and outcomes. Like basically, we want to see what in their life is going to be like a driving force. What's going to help them to achieve the goals and the outcomes that they have? What can help?
Great, right? So we typically have come across and work with youth and families because they have needs that exist, right? And so as Rachel's saying, the strengths can really help us look at what can help us to work with those needs, right? Everyone, if we can identify some of those strengths that are useful, those can actually help with the development and help to combat or overcome or work around or work through the needs that do exist. So we have great ideas here in the chat box as well to assist with building the plan of care, right? Really important that we don't just focus on needs, but we include strengths and strength building in our plan of care. So we can develop a plan of care that's relevant to them. Yep, right. So those strengths are a huge part of life as well. We want to be focused on the individual. Angela says, it gives us something to work on to deal with the issues that are present. Great. So you guys have really all, focused around this idea. And the other thing that we really want to focus on in this particular time together is how these strengths and how all of what you just said is supportive and helpful in working with very young children. Research in the last decade or so has really blown everything out of the water in centuries past when children, and especially young children, were thought of as mini adults. And we now know how different the brain is throughout stages of development. And what we know from all of our research really is how important the first 5 years are, how quickly the brain is developing, and the change that happens, especially in years 0 to 3 for a child, is exponentially faster than at any other time in our life, but also really can, the way things are shaped and those early experiences really are precursors to development throughout life, throughout childhood, and can set our kiddos on a really good path if they have all of those basic needs met, and if they have that love, that stimulation, the environment around them, and also to be able to capture and build some strengths. Perhaps we look at early intervention services are there for that reason, so that maybe we can catch on to some things that are areas of need early on. And they can even become a strength if we're able to build those up through early intervention. Again, this is such an important time for us to really take a look at setting these youth on a great path. So that idea of, let me just see if I missed anything there. Okay, so how do we identify, what do we look for in strengths in really young children, right? It's certainly the first thing that we can do is take a look at our documentation that we have. We can get feedback from caregivers or daycare providers or teachers. And those are great ways to hear stories and anecdotes or descriptions of some strengths that exist in young kiddos. But what about when you're working directly, or what if you don't have a lot of that information, or these folks aren't able to identify strengths? What's the way to kind of get in there and see what you can find out with a child, especially thinking about those that may be young, too young, or nonverbal? What are some of your ideas? How can we look at that?
I like this question, but for our the way that we do our eligibility, we actually don't really have strengths questions, but it's a good question to think about.
So Angela said, yes, thank you, Rachel. Angela said, observe the child's interactions with the caregivers. Okay, great. Observing them during the interview, right? And observing them. And when we're observing them, what are some things that we're looking for? I'm sorry, my dog is, I don't know if you can hear her. I'm trying to get someone else in the house to let her out if anyone's here. So we're looking for the relationships with parents, their attention, others in the home. So if we think about some of the strengths that we're looking for, that developmentally appropriate behavior as well, exactly. And we can see that what it comes down to at this age, sure, we can have an interview, but I'm not sure, if under 5 years old, how that goes. You may kind of already, this may seem obvious already, but when you talk about an interview with a young child, you may already be thinking about this, but it's really observing play, right? It's observing everything at this age, all of the learning and the exploration and all of those skills and social interactions, that curiosity, the adaptability, those strengths that we have on this 0 to 5 cans, those really can all be shown through interaction and through play. So you can either observe them with the caregiver, as you said, or you might watch them engaging in play with someone else, or you may kind of jump in and engage in some play. And that idea of play is very, very wide open, right? It could just be a conversation, a story, a silly kind of thing. But it could be involving toys or other objects or a game. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But some of the things you're looking at, as you see on this slide, for an infant, for example, you can look for those strengths in curiosity and the strengths in their developmental stage by looking at those milestones are there. An infant is putting things in their mouth because that's how the initial sensory input is taken and everything is learned. The texture, are they moving and manipulating toys around and in their mouth? Sounds funny, but that's a good sign. If a toy is dropped, does a young infant or young toddler look around for it? Are they able to find it? Or do they maybe look around and find something else? Or do they become distraught? Those are the kinds of things that can kind of lean us toward picking up some of that temperament that Brandon was talking about. That's positive. That is a good internal strength. Let's see, Angela. In this virtual world we live in, I use my animals to draw the child in and be interactive. Great. I assume you mean like your real animals, like your pets, right? Or do you mean like toy animals? Because either one could be great, right? The visual, right? You can't sit there with them, but boy, what a great thing to do to find anything like puppets or real animals or toys that you can show and engage in that visual interest. Absolutely great idea, because it is a very different way of trying to observe those strengths. And I see Brandon, are you back?
Barry, I am back. I don't know what happened, but I'm trying to roll with the punches here. I'm trying to reorient myself, and I'll jump right in when you're ready. Okay, I'll do this slide and then I'll pass it over to you if you're ready. Okay. Excellent. All right. So here what we can take a look at is these are the items that the CANS 0 to 5 full version has us look at in the child strengths domain. So when we think about rating for strengths, which is a different way of looking at how we rate for needs items, but when we look at rating for strengths, we are identifying, are any of these things present and useful, as you all mentioned before, to build into a plan of care or to help with meeting some of the goals or needs that are present. Are these things something we can tap into, and are they useful? That means 0 for a centerpiece strength, a 1 for a strength that is present and useful.
And for these items that maybe you don't see evidence, or there's no experience or anything that you can find that is showing you there's a strength in that item, that's where we give that 3. And a 3 is the rating in the strengths domain for an item that we don't see a strength identified in this area. And it could possibly mean that when you get to creating this plan and looking at that vision, you may decide on a couple of those 3s even could be something really worth looking into and building, such as that example of early intervention, depending on the big picture. Oftentimes we look at strengths that don't exist, and we may want to choose a couple that could be very beneficial if we work on building those. So as you can see, from a few slides ago, we talked about those internal and those external items that all make up the child's strengths. So family of origin, certainly foster family, those are things in the child's environment that we want to identify if those are strengths that are helping that youth, right? Especially that, as we talked about during that 0 to 3 brain development, is this a family of origin that has someone in their existence, in their environment, that helps to really raise up and attend to the relationship, the stimulation, the basic needs, and beyond that in helping that youth, the young child, build as best they can. Foster family, if there is a foster family that the child is with, is that a strength that we can use? Are they a strong foster family with a good relationship to work with? And then we have some of these other things. And also, if we skip down, relationship stability also is that external. Is there someone, at least in this child's life so far, their short life, if we're talking about a very young child, but still that stability of at least one caregiver that's been with them and sustained that attachment. The internal things here that you see, how are they with social relationships, the eye contact? Are they optimistic, and do they have a positive affect, right? Are they smiley? Are they easy to soothe? Do they make good eye contact and seem like a generally happy temperament baby? Curiosity, we did talk about as well. Adaptability and persistence. And Brandon will be able to give some more examples of stories of how we can identify these as well as we go on.
Excellent. Thank you, Barry. I'm going to see if I can go ahead and do this. My apologies, guys. I don't know what is going on with my setup here. Can you see my screen? All right. So again, we'll do the same thing. If I get choppy, if I start to break up a little bit, just let me know. All right, so on this particular slide, we're going to compare and we're going to contrast some of the items from the 0 to 5 version versus the 6 to 21. So consider that you do work with very young children. How do you tell their story? How do you tell the story of a really young kid? Sometimes our 6 to 21 kids, or even our 5-year-olds, are able to give you some details about what their life looks like, or about some of the things that they're going through. But how do you capture the strengths, perhaps from a kid that's nonverbal, right? So let's consider a kid. I'll give you guys a scenario. Kid named Ricky. I'll read a quick story and then I'll ask a question about it. So you're working with a kid named Ricky, and I sort of want you to put yourself in a position in your mind where you're imagining who Ricky is and how Ricky operates, right? So in this exercise, visualize an approximate age. You choose the age for your Ricky. I'm going to go with, let's say, a 5-year-old Ricky. Okay. So I want you to think about what it is that you think that Ricky might be going through and how to pull strengths to the surface, right? So if you need to, close your eyes and imagine who Ricky is. And think about Ricky's centerpiece strengths circling around social relationships. All of the collaborative feedback that you might receive about Ricky, think of the documentation that you read about Ricky, and your own observations that clearly support a 0, clearly support a centerpiece strength for Ricky around social relationships. Maybe that's social relationships with peers, etc. Maybe that's social relationships with caregivers. Maybe that's with teachers. Think about all the things that those folks might tell you about young Ricky regarding social relationships with peers. Imagine the last time that you worked with Ricky, and what that experience was like for you, right? Think about the information that might have been provided to illustrate some of Ricky's strengths. All right, so if you've closed your eyes, I wish that I sort of could see you and I take a screenshot, but if you haven't closed your eyes, we can kind of talk about it. So open your eyes if you did close them. Describe for me, if you can, what you imagined about Ricky's behaviors that could support strengths. All right, so anybody can go in the chat box or unmute yourself. Think about your version of this kid that I just described and think about their social relationships. What do you imagine, right, about this kid? How do you speak towards those strengths? Anybody can chime in. I'll wait for you. Okay, so Rachel says, I was told Ricky loves to laugh, loves to laugh with other kids and play with them. And Rachel, how old is your Ricky, the Ricky that you imagined?
3, because my son is 3.
3-year-old Ricky, I love it. All right, Angela, interaction with grandparents, laughter, giggles, hugs abound. And how old is your Ricky, Angela?
He's 4.
4-year-old Ricky. Let's do one more Ricky if we can. One more Ricky if we can. Okay, Dr. Arabellis says easygoing, respectful with adults, able to make friends. And how old might your Ricky be? 4-year-old Ricky. Okay, so as you can see, as you're looking at the screen, we see social relationships for the 0 to 5 as an item, and we see social relationships with peers for the 6 to 21 tool. In essence, oh, Barry, I love it. This is exactly what I was looking for. Age 1 waddles over to me when I come in the room and smile, hands me a toy. Absolutely. So in looking at social relationships, clearly you can see a difference depending on Ricky's age and development, right? Social relationships would look different depending on where Ricky is, where Ricky is developmentally, not only from a developmental sort of intellectual capacity, but also from moral, emotional capacities. I'm thinking about maybe even physically, right? Barry specifically mentioned waddled over to me. And so sometimes these strengths, Shani, did you have something? I'm going to take that as a, Shani, you there? All right, so the reality is, am I breaking up again? No, okay. The reality is there's a tremendous amount of growth and development that occurs in infancy that you might see sort of fleshed out through certain strengths, but that could be very different at the age of 4 or 5. Right, so we're not simply looking at this static person when we're exploring the items. We're looking at a specific individual, and we're sort of rating them in the context of how they exist in the world around them. And so that's sort of something that I think is important for you to take away from today's presentation. So let's look at action levels very quickly, and then we'll move forward. So action levels, I'll remind you very quickly of what they are, and then I'll give you an example through the lens of child strengths 0 to 5. So remember that a 0 for action for strengths is a centerpiece strength. This is a focal positive, a protective factor. This is something that you're absolutely using in planning today. It's something that you use in the plan of care right now, right? And so I'll give you a quick example. Say you're working with, say, 2-year-old Ricky, who attends daycare full-time, easily separates from parents at drop-off. Ricky has a temperament that engages with other kids in the daycare, doesn't have a crisis or a tantrum when something's grabbed out of his hands or her hands by a classmate. Ricky simply reaches for another toy to play with. At mealtime as well as potty time, Ricky will follow verbal and nonverbal prompts. So the internal characteristics of this young Ricky are strengths that we can use, right? They're healthy development, aspects of healthy development. So we would consider this a centerpiece strength, something that we want to be able to duplicate long after. We want Ricky and Ricky's family to be able to duplicate long after we're done with services, okay? And so what I described would be a centerpiece around social relationships, and it would also be a centerpiece around adaptability. Remember that a one is a useful strength, not quite as powerful as a centerpiece strength at this point, right? It's identified, it's usable, we're gonna have it in that plan of care, and we're gonna move forward with it. So this strength exists in planning, however, it might not be, something that you see as readily available. You might have to have conversations with the team about it, right? The team may decide that we're going to tweak some things here and there in order to build upon it and make it a centerpiece strength. Or the team might decide that the strength is useful in the way that we see it. And it doesn't need to be a centerpiece strength to be powerful for this kid. So another example, I'll use Ricky again. I'll highlight family of origin for you. So that's the first item in this domain for 0 to 5. So for a toddler, from the first example, let's say Ricky has a single mom, only parent, works long hours, she enjoys her job, works very hard to pay for rent, and she works very hard to pay for daycare. She's doing really well. She's not with Ricky all of the time because work can be a barrier for her. But on weekends, she tries to get to the library, spend some time relationship building, being supportive with Ricky. So this mom is sort of devoted to the connection with Ricky, but clearly identified that things can be better, right? Things can be better and things can be more powerful in terms of the connection between her and Ricky. So if we're looking at family of origin, that's a situation where some barriers exist that don't quite put it to the degree, family of origin, to the degree that it would be a centerpiece strength at this point in time, right? So it's there. Mom is working really hard on weekends for that connection to be realized. A two is a strength that's been identified, but it's not yet useful, okay? It's there, but we can't use it in the plan of care at this point in time. And then a 3 would be significant discovery needs to happen in order to identify it as a strength at all, right? No strength is identified in this area. And so again, reminder, we're using our 0s and our 1s in our plan of care. We're using our 2s and 3s to build upon things and to sort of build folks up and develop those areas, all right? So again, at any point, if there are any questions, concerns, thoughts, what have you, please feel free to ask them. If not, I'm going to keep moving forward. You can just throw them in the chat box and I'll catch it at some point. Very quickly, we're going to go through a decision tree, a flow chart for assessing for strengths. You guys may be familiar with this. If not, I'm hoping that you'll be able to use it in the near future. It's very easy to hash out where a strength stands, right? By asking this one question. Is there evidence of a strength in this area? If the answer to that question is no, then we're going to rate it as such. There's no evidence of a strength here, right? So there's no known strength. That's a 3. If that answer is no. If the answer to that question is, well, maybe, then we would rate that potential strength, that maybe, as a 2. Okay, so there's some potential here. Perhaps we need to build upon it. That would be a 2. We can't yet use it in our plan of care. Lastly, if we answer that question and it's a yes, then obviously we have some decisions to make, either a 0 or a 1. All right, we answer that as a yes. That 1 being, yes, it's useful, but not quite a centerpiece. And the 0 being absolutely yes, it's a centerpiece. We can use it today in our planning. So very quickly, here is a resource for you guys. This is the same exact assessing for strengths flowchart / decision tree. You can get this decision tree as a free resource, a PDF to put by your desk at kansnyinstitute.org. There are also additional tip sheets at this site. Please, please, please go there, check it out. I'm sure there's tons of useful stuff that you could use in your practice and in your day-to-day work. All right, so we've talked a little bit about what strengths are, how to use strengths, what they look like for early childhood development. Let's practice. We're going to practice with a case vignette. This kid's name is Mason. I'm going to read Mason, ask you all a series of questions. Mason is a 4-year-old boy living with his biological mom. The identity of Mason's father is unknown. Mason has two siblings that are much older than he is. His brother is 17 and his sister is 15. Mason gets along well with his sister, but does not get along well with his brother, who finds him annoying. Mason's mother is frequently frustrated because he refuses to follow directions. Mason currently attends preschool in his neighborhood. Mason has frequent episodes of crying and screaming and difficulty soothing himself when he becomes upset. Mason displays interpersonal skills when he's playing with other children one-on-one, but he resists playing in larger groups. When he's playing with a classmate one-on-one, he has a broad imagination. He invents games and he explores new toys. Mason has difficulties adjusting to change in activities, even with the support of his preschool teacher. Mason is usually well-behaved at home, but he'll throw tantrums when he's tired or when he's hungry. Okay, so this is Mason. This is what's going on with Mason. So let's think about these circumstances, and I have a couple of questions for you. Does this paragraph about Mason indicate any strengths that Mason might have? If so, what are they? Does this paragraph indicate any strengths that Mason might have? Yes, curiosity. Okay. Okay. Yes, he likes one-on-one contact. Excellent. Anything else? Interpersonal skills. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Dr. Arabellis. Preschool, imagination, Angela and Monica. All right. Are there any strengths that we consider useful in our planning right now? Useful. So we're thinking ones.
Could it be that he gets along well with his sister? Would that be a one?
Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. Consider what might, what some of the centerpiece strengths would be. Okay. So we'll take a peek at these ratings. This vignette actually comes from our much broader national TCOM team and so we did some collaborative ratings on this particular vignette. So I want to explore these ratings and see what you guys think for Mason's strengths. So here we go. So for family of origin, that's been rated 2, right? Mason gets along with his sister, but not his mother or brother, right? So family of origin, there's some stuff there, right? We can't use that in our planning at the moment in terms of family of origin. Mason, the vignette doesn't indicate that Mason is in foster care, so foster family would not be applicable. But if you look at social relationships, we would probably rate that as a useful strength. This would probably be a 1 because as you guys have indicated in the chat box, Mason plays one-on-one. He's imaginative, he explores, right? He's sort of, uses his mind and he's quite, at least based on what we know about him, this would be a useful strength for us to use in planning for Mason. Relationship stability, a 0. Stable relationship with the mother, okay? Stable relationship with the mother and the sister. So this shouldn't say siblings, it probably should say sister. So we want to use that on a day-to-day basis. How can we inject the relationship with mom and the relationship with the sister into the plan? The fact of the matter is, again, we're trying to get folks to utilize their strengths, their talents, and their interests to address the needs so that when we walk away, they know how to do that. They have some tools in their toolbox to be able to address some of the issues that will continue. They might be different, but throughout the trajectory and entirety of our lives, we have obstacles and barriers, and so we want to give them tools to be able to address them. Optimism and affect. No mention of optimism or Mason's affect at all. So we're not going to rate that as a strength. There's no evidence of it. Curiosity, we would certainly use it to our benefit. I do believe, let's see, who was that? That was Dr. Arabellis. Curiosity, right? It's useful. Mason is imaginative, exploring. So some of the same rationale for social relationships. Useful in daycare settings, right? We know that he will interact depending upon what the situation looks like at that daycare. Adaptability, no mention of it. So it's not a strength, right? We would have to ask more questions about adaptability, adjusting to any particular setting or situation. Persistence, no evidence of a strength there either, okay? So this is what it would look like for a young kid in rating their strengths. questions, thoughts, ideas before we jump into tips? Thoughts, questions? I'll give you another moment. Think about that. Okay. Well, if you have a thought or an idea and it comes to you at another time, again, feel free to put that in the chat box. I like the kind of interaction that we're having in the chat box. Lets me know that you're still here, you're present. I don't have to sort of go over something that we've already talked about. So some quick rating tips. We'll go through 3 rating tips very quickly. The first rating tip is that you absolutely want to use the reference guide. Why is it important to use the reference guide? Well, first of all, it's important because there's description language in the reference guide. If you look in the blue box there, family of origin. Family of origin, now you might have your own definition of what family of origin is. You might have your own definition of what social relationships is, right? But keep in mind, family of origin in with regard to this particular definition is based on however the family defines it. So this could be a kinship family, this could be an aunt, an uncle, an adopted family. It's not about what we think of family of origin is as a care manager or staff person. It's not up to us to define it. You want to really use the reference guide to guide your ratings, right? They provide, the manual will provide a parameter for which you should be rating for every single item. You're never going to remember the definition for 90 plus items on this tool. So you really want to use the reference guide to do so. The details are critical. The details of these definitions are critical to your success in rating children and families. Also, it's critical to your success in partnering. So you definitely want to use that reference guide to orient yourself and ground yourself. The second tip is strength-based. You want to absolutely be strength-based. You want to focus on strengths in your engagement with children and families. And you also want to be balanced in your conversation instead of solely focusing on deficits, right? Not focusing on things not going well. You want to be deliberate about illustrating the things that are going well for families. It's not often that families hear good things about their own kid. I'll tell you as a parent, we have a tendency as parents to brag and boast about what our kids are good at, brag and boast about things that make them stand out from other kids that are their age. Parents and caregivers are not typically used to other people highlighting the strengths of their kid or highlighting the strengths of their family. So we want to highlight those small wins. We want to highlight those things that most of the rest of the world takes for granted. Be deliberate in your approach to explaining and showing where strengths exist within the clients that we're working with, particularly with the young ones, right? Questions, thoughts on the first 2 tips? Questions?
I was just gonna say it's all like I agree, and it's always a good thing to acknowledge, when especially when you first start the appointment, you acknowledge, nice kid. Oh my goodness, he's looking all over. He's cute. They like to hear that kind of stuff to make it gives them a kind of a connection, like you actually care. So usually I try to start off by just first observing the kid and giving little comments or tips or something encouraging.
Absolutely, Rachel. That's exactly what we want you to do. So I want to think about your example, right? How might you? So it's easy to say, oh yeah, we're going to acknowledge and we're going to give some. We're going to give back some of the observations that we see. That's easier done with the older kids. How do you do that with the younger kids? How do you complement and show strengths and take a strength-based approach with the younger kids 0 to 5?
So when I had an appointment with a baby, the parent held the baby up and was like, say hi to the nurse. And the baby was looking all over. And I was like, oh, he's so curious. So I was going based on what he was doing. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's a great way to do it. I can tell you in thinking about when my guys were super little, right? Like before they were verbal, one of the, some of the strengths that were acknowledged, and you typically see this in the doctor's office when the doctors are looking at milestones and et cetera, right? One of the strengths that my kid had that I didn't realize was a strength because I don't have a background in early childhood development was the fact that my little guy could hold his head up on his own. And I remember the nurse at the doctor's appointment saying, "Oh my God, your kid is so strong. Your kid is pretty advanced." And I'm like, "Well, you know, he is my son." So, and, you know, but the point was that this person, this nurse, was strength-based in her approach and educating me at the same time about early childhood development. And so I did a little bit of, you know, digging and some research on it. Wow, this kid is, you know, at this typical milestone before most kids his age. And so that was great. It was a strength that put me in a position to do a little bit more research about it. And so that's what we want to do. We want to be deliberate in our approach. Frame the strengths as opportunities to challenge and resolve needs. We want to take our strengths, take the strengths that we identify rather, and use them as an avenue to address the identified needs. The final tip that I want you guys to walk away with, strengths rated as a 3 may be opportunities for strength development. Okay, so it's important to always focus on whether or not the strength is useful, right? So just because the strength is not there doesn't mean that it's a need, right? Just because we didn't see optimism and positive affect with Mason doesn't mean that that's a need. I want you to understand that there is no correlation or relationship between the two and vice versa. Just because it's a need doesn't mean that it needs to be a strength, right? So I'll go back to the scenario, I'll go back to optimism and positive affect. You might have a child that doesn't frequently laugh, doesn't frequently smile, rarely seems to enjoy themselves, doesn't display much positive affect at all. The information would likely result in most people rating that as a 3, right? No strength identified. But if you were to take a personal approach and connect that observation to some sort of negative connotation, right, or something that you consider that's bad, then that's not going to be beneficial for the people that you're working with. That's not going to be beneficial for that child. So the 3 simply means that there's not any known strengths in this area. It doesn't mean that it's a negative thing, right? It also means that we should probably be having a discussion with the team about any potential benefits of building up that strength or discovering it at all, right? If it's a 3, there's no strength identified. So discovering if there's a strength in this area, we're going to have those discussions. That discussion should feel different from your discussions regarding addressing any needs, okay? I'll take another example at it. Let's look at residential stability. So let's say you work with a child that has a stable relationship with a caregiver that will likely remain stable for the foreseeable future, right? This kid appears that they're gonna remain stable. The information would likely result in what? You saying, wow, the stability is there. I'm gonna rate relationship stability as a 1, right? As defined simply as a means of talking about a steady, predictable relationship. This doesn't necessarily mean that the child and the caregiver relationship is perfect. Just because it's a 1 and it's useful doesn't mean it's perfect, right? They might have some areas of difficulty with regard to their relationship, right? But since we separate our conversations about needs and our conversations about strengths, we can discuss that from a positive framework and based on how things are useful without having the simultaneous conversation or discussion about the needs. Okay, so remember, strengths and needs are separate from one another and they inform the plan of care differently. All right, so that's our 3rd tip. Again, I'll go back really quickly. Tip 1, use that reference guide. Tip 2, a strength-based approach is important. And step 3, you absolutely want to understand the relationship between strengths and needs. Just because you know, something's a 3 doesn't make it bad. All right. Questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas, comments, experiences, things that you guys have seen with this age group. This is your opportunity. I'm glad I didn't lose the connection again. All right, let's see what we have here. Rachel, I'm glad that this is helpful for you. So the next piece that I'm going to jump into before we close out is our Kansas New York Technical Assistance Institute contact information. Just remember that there are tons of resources out there. We've separated the state into 4 different regions. Our Western region, our Western regional lead is on the call. Thank you, Barry, for backing me up today. I did not expect to lose that connection, but thank you. So Barry covers all of those counties in that teal color. So if you fall into that area, she's your go-to. Her contact information is right here on the screen. Sarah Kane covers the Capital Region. Mary Nichols covers the Hudson Valley region. And the New York, Long Island area, we have Cynthia Schemelty, and Dr. Arabella is on this call. She's one of the coaches in that region as well. So lots and lots of resources out, that we have at your that you have to your disposal. Please use them. Please use them. Don't forget www.kansnyinstitute.org. It is absolutely there for you to take full advantage of. I want to thank you guys for hanging out for an hour with us today. And please, I apologize again for losing that connection.